Hello everyone, I'm glad you're able to attend our virtual presentation on using customized GIS maps with hydraulic features in your community. We hope that you will find this useful in your day-to-day applications that will make your job a little easier. Before we get into the topic, I want to briefly introduce you to ERA. We are a municipal engineering firm with a staff of over 40 professionals providing civil, structural, environmental, and land surveying services. For over 30 years, we've specialized in helping communities solve their stormwater challenges, whether through regional watershed studies or as part of a transportation project. Our goal today, however, is to focus on you and your community. We want to give you ideas into how you can leverage your current GIS investment to make decisions about drainage and potential flooding conditions. My name is Molly Garrow, and I'm a design engineer here at ERA. In my work with municipalities, I've had countless backyard discussions with residents, talking about their drainage concerns. I'll share some of those experiences with you today. With me is Jenny Lowenstein, our Senior Water Resources Engineer. She brings 16 years of stormwater engineering experience, and as you will see shortly, has a passion for creating handy stormwater tools for everyday use. Mike Maslowski's expertise is working on community-wide watershed analyses. Mike has worked in many communities throughout northeastern Illinois and southern Wisconsin. He will highlight how GIS has been a huge time saver for him in performing detailed stormwater analysis. Today's objective is to provide simple tools and strategies using the GIS data your community has already invested in to make more informed stormwater decisions. We will discuss how these GIS applications can provide manageable ways to complete community-wide stormwater analysis and long-term capital improvement plans. The presentation is structured into different tiers of complexity, so no matter what level of GIS data your community currently has, we'll show you how your GIS system has practical uses. At higher tiers, you'll see how GIS is used in robust stormwater modeling and other powerful applications. So hopefully, after our presentation, you'll be able to walk away with one or two ways to work smarter rather than harder. With that, I'd like to hand things off to Jenny, who will discuss the first level of GIS applications.
We're going to start the 101 portion of the presentation on how to use GIS maps with hydraulic features to inform development in your community. Before we talk about the application of using the maps, let's go through some examples of the kind of hydraulic features that can be created and shown on these H&H GIS maps. Here are the basic three hydrologic and hydraulic items that ERA creates using GIS scripts that can be shown on these maps. They are GIS maps that show the overland flow paths, the depressional storage areas, and watershed basins. We're going to focus on the use of them in this 101 portion of the presentation. In addition, we'll talk about other useful map information that can be obtained from various entities that are helpful to include in these H&H GIS maps. The first hydraulic feature that can be created is to map the overland flow paths in your community. What these maps can show is when you have heavy rains and saturated soil conditions, where is the water flowing above the surface, regardless of storm sewers and outside of obvious creek beds. Let's zoom in on this map and talk about what exactly this can look like on a GIS exhibit. All right, so we've zoomed in on a typical residential neighborhood in this community. This neighborhood was constructed prior to this community's stormwater ordinance that now requires planned and designed overland flow routes. Without any plan, it is not immediately clear where water goes, even if looking at a contour map. You'd have to probably mark it up to be able to identify the paths. So what do these lines in different colors show? It's showing the overland flow paths with these light to dark blue lines. If it starts raining at the top of this image, water can flow down this path. The different shades represent the amount of drainage being collected along that path. We found it helpful to split up the drainage areas as we've shown it here. We begin showing an overland flow path when just 1 acre of drainage area is tributary to that spot. Then we progressively show more and more drainage area. This really can demonstrate the magnitude of water that is flowing over land. The second hydraulic feature that is helpful to define and map is depressional storage areas. Depressional storage areas are defined as places that water can pond at least 1 foot of depth. You can identify a depressional area by closed contours. An engineer can use a contour map and hand draw this in. By bringing it into GIS, it allows for that information to be maintained, and when we zoom into this area, additional information can be included. So let's take a closer look. This depressional storage area is color-based on the depth of flooding in feet until water can overtop the depressional area. In this case, the dark red indicates water that has the potential to flood 4 or more feet at the location. Let's hope your detached garage isn't located in that spot. The third hydraulic feature that can prove helpful for communities that have a lot of floodplain or a lot of rivers running through it is some watershed and subwatershed basin delineations. This map is for a community that is 15 square miles in size and has four major rivers running through it and dissecting it. The watersheds are defined by red, blue, purple, and green, with the subwatersheds colored as a shade of the watershed it belongs to. Let's zoom into this yellow box area and look at what else it can show. Here we are looking at an area tributary to the West Fork River. The watershed has been divided into major subwatershed basins, and there are flow paths indicating the subwatershed's general direction of flow. This is not to be confused with the detailed overland flow paths we talked about previously. Apart from the main 3 hydraulic items we just discussed, overland flow paths, depressional storage areas, and watershed basins, there is additional information that is helpful to include on these H&H GIS maps. They are to add contours, FEMA flood hazards, especially the 100-year floodplain and the floodway, along with any Zone A's, aerial map underneath it so you can see what kind of structures are in your mapped overland flow paths or depressional areas, and lastly, if your community has it, to put the storm sewers on there too. All right, now that we've talked about the maps, let's talk about how we can leverage them to help your community be more resilient to urban flooding during the permitting review process and public interactions. Molly Garrow and I are going to walk you through these 3 categories and provide you with real-world examples of how they are implemented. Molly's going to start us off with permit reviews.
Thanks, Jenny. When issuing permits, the community's goal is to complete timely but thorough reviews. In some circumstances, communities may even offer over-the-counter or expedited same-day reviews for improvements we consider to be simple permits, like sheds, garages, and fences. In these instances, however, the review by an engineer or water resources engineer may be skipped. This could open up opportunities for the proposed sheds and patios to block or constrict an overland flow path. To avoid this and still provide timely reviews without the need for a detailed drainage analysis, a municipality can use these H&H maps like they would a utility atlas for a quick review of the homeowner's property. For example, a homeowner with only a permit application and an annotated plat of survey could apply to their community for a permit to install a new fence. If this homeowner is new to the property or unfamiliar with the specific drainage patterns in their neighborhood, the proposed fence could easily be placed in a location that blocks or constricts an overland flow path. However, if that community staff reviews a GIS map with hydraulic features when they receive the permit, they may find the proposed improvement is located in the flow path and flag the permit for a second review by the village engineer. If the community has these maps readily available, the staff can complete a quick and easy review. This step can save from future flooding conditions that can trigger property damage and drainage complaints. With that, I'll send it back to Jenny.
Thanks, Molly. We're going to talk about something we love, drainage complaints. In some communities, drainage complaints can be part engineering and part therapy. Is this really a drainage issue, or is this just an opportunity for a neighbor to vent? Using overland flow and depressional storage maps can give the responding municipal staff much more information. Is it a local drainage issue or a regional drainage issue? Is it likely a legitimate issue or an exaggerated complaint? Are they experiencing this kind of flooding? And do you have H&H maps that could verify this? Let's do a case study about using the GIS maps for drainage complaints. We were part of a public outreach to solicit drainage complaints. A couple of neighbors in the same block wrote in to say that they experienced river-like flows between their homes. When we plotted their address on top of the GIS overland flow map, it became obvious what the problem was. The neighbors were by this red star, and they had over 70 acres of drainage area flowing right through their side yards. One of the neighbors sent in a video at the location of that red star that shows the kind of flooding they experienced. So let's zoom in to that area where the drainage complaint was. Given the information we have with the GIS overland flow map features, we know it's going to be a doozy. Let's see if the video confirms that. Well, the real life experience of these residential property owners lines up with the GIS overland flow map. These maps help municipal engineers and staff to have a quick reference to verify and validate the eyewitness account of their residents. It can help you prioritize many drainage complaints too. Molly will finish up the last item in this section.
Our next example of how these maps can be useful for municipality staff is during development reviews. Even when engineers design a site plan for an improvement project, and even when it's reviewed by the municipality's engineer, if the engineers don't consider upstream tributary flows, the site design may create new flooding conditions or worsen flooding conditions for the proposed project. If you use these overland flow maps, just like any other utility atlas, they can be shared with the design engineer and the review engineer to develop the best site plan. In this example, a vacant lot was developed with a single-family home, but because this new development was below the municipality's trigger for a BMP, the analysis of the upstream tributary flows was not completed. This site appeared to have positive slopes, there's a permeable upstream neighbor, and there's existing storm sewers both on the north and south ends of the property. However, when we zoom out, we can easily see with the use of this overland flow map that there's 5 acres tributary to the site. During storm events, the school property overtops at this location. Construction wrapped up, and within the first 2 months, a spring rain event brought 4 feet of water into the basement of this newly constructed home. This ended with an expensive retrofit to add flood protection to the lower level of the home, regrade the overland flow paths in the side yard, and install yard drains to provide an outlet for trapped water in the back. The cost to the homeowner was thousands of dollars. It also required a variance from the village and a new site design. The review of the overland flow map may have prevented some of these drainage issues. With that, I'm going to hand things off to Mike, and he'll take us through the second level of GIS mapping.
Thanks, Molly. Now I'll take things a step further and discuss how GIS can be an invaluable tool in conjunction with the modeling used to design and implement capital improvement projects. Worry not, even a GIS program in infancy can be of great assistance to modeling efforts. With more developed GIS programs that include, for example, complete detailed information of stormwater assets, the benefits of H&H modeling efforts increases exponentially as it frees up an engineer's time for analysis and implementation of projects instead of data collection and input. Lastly, I'll discuss how model results can be exported back into GIS for further analysis, which allows for better visualization of data for engineers and stakeholders to make decisions. Even a municipality with a limited GIS program can produce the base H&H maps that Jenny had described before. At a minimum, only topographic data is needed to produce a base H&H map, which is typically available on a county level. The base H&H maps can be utilized to quickly identify problem areas and focus modeling efforts only where they are needed. Here we have an example base H&H map that shows the overflow routes and depressional areas within a subwatershed. These maps were used in conjunction with flooding reports, staff knowledge, and resident surveys to verify that the problem areas warranted detailed modeling. Let's zoom in on problem area R1 for further discussion. Here you can more clearly see the depressional areas and numerous overland flow routes contributing to this problem area. This area had also received reports of severe and frequent flooding. Therefore, a model was created to produce recommended improvements. In this case, an existing conditions XP-SWIM 2D model was created by importing topographic and storm surge data from GIS. If GIS data was not available for the storm surge system, field survey or utility atlases could have been utilized to create the model. Regardless, the base H&H maps were of great value in creating a targeted approach for which areas to perform detailed modeling. Now let's see the results from the model. Here's the existing 100-year critical duration flooding results for the same problem area. Raster data was exported from XP-SWIM to create this exhibit in GIS. Now let's compare the modeler results to the original H&H base maps. Here you can see that the model shows overland flow routes and depressional areas that closely match those shown in the base H&H map. This goes to show how H&H base maps are a valuable tool in identifying problem areas. Lastly, it should be noted that other modeling programs also allow for importation and exportation of GIS data. And here's the preferred alternative for this same problem area. Structural flooding risk was eliminated. The proposed 100-year flooding extents were exported from the model to create this exhibit. Based on the good quality of this municipality's GIS data, the time it took from the start of building the model to recommending a preferred alternative for their 2021 capital improvement program was about a week and a half. Robust GIS data allows for direct importation into models, greatly reducing times it takes an engineer to build the model. This can reduce budget or free up an engineer's time away from data entry to allow for a more thorough analysis of proposed solutions. When I mention robust GIS data in regards to modeling, it simply means having completed attributes for the storm surge systems. The more attributes, the better. Here's an example of a community with a very robust GIS database for their storm surge system that was a pleasure to work with. They had to put a lot of effort in collecting storm surge information, which included attributes useful for modeling. Attributes are easily assignable to variables in the model, and in this case, the model was completely built with a single click of the import button. On the contrary, databases with many null attributes ends up requiring manual entry of data. Locations of pipes and structures can still be imported into the model, but ultimately they are just lines in space and will require further data collection to manually input into the model. I should also mention, while not imported into the model, having robust data for other infrastructure assets, such as sanitary and water main, helps avoid conflicts when producing proposed alternatives. The beauty of working with models that utilize GIS is that data transfer can go both ways. Results data exported from a model can be displayed and further analyzed using tools available in GIS. Here's an example of model output data that was converted into flooding extents, elevations, and depths in GIS. Showing the same results 3 different ways side by side in a single GIS exhibit allows for quick analysis of flooding results. For an example, an engineer would be keen on the fact that color changes in the elevation maps would indicate areas of conveyance versus areas with static colors that indicate level pools of ponding. With such information, an engineer can make better decisions when producing proposed solutions. Spatial analysis tools within GIS can be used to create relations between various sets of data available in GIS. For example, this exhibit compares the model's flooding elevation to adjacent grade information of structures. When the flooding elevation exceeds a certain threshold above the adjacent grade, it was shown to be at risk for flooding as represented by the structure shown in red. This allows for a quick quantification of impacted structures for cost-benefit analysis.
The final use of GIS maps with hydraulic features is organizing and prioritizing community-wide stormwater capital improvements. As Mike described in section 201, the H&H maps can be an excellent tool to predict where drainage issues occur in a community and where additional modeling is required. A targeted approach to modeling can save communities planning budgets and allow them to use funds for design and implementation of the proposed improvement. To get to a place where a community can make decisions of where to spend design funds, an inventory of known flooding problems or stormwater infrastructure deficiencies is required. ERA will take the H&H maps prepared for a community and begin identifying potential problem areas based on overland flow paths, depressional areas, and existing storm sewer locations. As Jenny pointed out back in section 101, we can predict where significant overland flows and local flooding may occur. Sometimes this looks like Mike and I jumping into the map so we can get a real visualization of the subwatersheds. These tools are helpful for budgeting capital expenses in a community. A capital improvement plan should be considered a living document that can be revised as needed throughout the length of the plan. Storm events and resident feedback may highlight new deficiencies in the stormwater infrastructure and new projects that have to be incorporated into the existing plan. Here you'll see a flowchart that ERA prepared that shows ways communities can expand upon the existing capital improvement plan. Once a board adopts a stormwater master plan, they've prepared their community with a roadmap for the next few years. Here's an example of a master plan ERA prepared that organizes projects by phases over the next 10 years. In this example, Phase 2 engineering has already begun and construction is anticipated in the summer of this year. Residents and village board members will soon be able to see physical improvements from the GIS map analysis in this village-wide master plan. By having H&H GIS maps that are used in a community in multiple applications, like our 101 examples to inform development and assist residents, and our 201 examples to guide important capital improvement and modeling, you've created a vocabulary that politicians, residents, and businesses get used to hearing. When it comes to finally budgeting for these projects, the motivation and reasoning are clear to all the involved parties. It's much easier to build upon this understanding and make decisions on where to invest in stormwater improvement when consultants, board members, and residents are all working with the same information. That concludes our presentation on how to use GIS maps with hydraulic information in your community. Thanks for joining us.